Welcome back to Spiritual Journals. I am so glad you're here today because we're diving into something truly powerful, life-changing secrets from the life of Daniel. Yes, Daniel from the Bible. Now, I know what you're thinking: how can a story from thousands of years ago relate to the challenges we're facing today? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack together. Daniel's story is not just a tale of ancient times, it's packed with wisdom, faith, and strategies that apply directly to the challenges we're all navigating in our modern world. Maybe you're feeling the weight of pressure at work, wondering how to stay true to your values in an environment that doesn't always share them. Or maybe you're wrestling with big decisions and don't know which direction to take. Maybe you feel like the odds are stacked against you, and you're searching for courage just to keep going. Here's the thing: Daniel faced all of that too. He lived in a world where standing up for what he believed in wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. Imagine being taken from your home, immersed in a foreign culture, and told to conform to beliefs and practices that went completely against your faith. That's the world Daniel found himself in, and yet, he thrived. Not because he had it easy, but because he leaned into God's strength and trusted Him every step of the way. And here's the exciting part: Daniel's life isn't just a historical story for us to read about. It's a guide, a blueprint, on how to live with faith, courage, and purpose, even when the world feels uncertain or overwhelming. Over the next few minutes, we're going to uncover the secrets that helped Daniel not only survive but thrive in the most challenging circumstances. We'll explore how he stayed faithful to God, trusted in the face of danger, and remained consistent in prayer no matter what was thrown his way. I'll also show you how Daniel's life is a reminder that God is always working, whether we see it or not. And here's the best part: the same God who was with Daniel in Babylon is with you right now, in whatever you're facing. So, stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to feel inspired, encouraged, and ready to face your challenges with the same faith and courage that Daniel had. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Secret number 1: stand firm in your faith, even when it's not popular. This is one of the most powerful lessons we can learn from Daniel's life, and it's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. In the first chapter of Daniel, we're introduced to a young man who is suddenly taken from everything familiar, his home, his culture, his way of life, and placed in Babylon, a kingdom with values and practices that directly opposed his faith in God. Imagine being just a teenager, taken captive, and told to conform to an entirely different way of life. It would have been so easy for Daniel to compromise, to just blend in, to go along with the crowd. But Daniel chose a different path. He chose to stand firm. Let's break this down and see how this lesson applies to our lives today. Daniel's situation in Babylon. When Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, arrived in Babylon, they were immediately faced with challenges to their faith. They were chosen to be trained for service in the king's court, which meant they were immersed in Babylonian culture, education, and practices. Part of this training included eating food and drinking wine from the king's table. Now, to most people, this wouldn't seem like a big deal. It's just food, right? But for Daniel, it was a matter of obedience to God. The food and wine had likely been offered to idols, and consuming it would have gone against the dietary laws God had given his people. Daniel could have rationalized it: everyone else is doing it, or God will understand, it's not like I have a choice. But instead, he resolved in his heart not to defile himself. He respectfully requested permission to eat only vegetables and drink water, a diet that honored his faith. And here's the key: God saw Daniel's faithfulness. In Daniel 1 verse 9, it says, "Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel." God honored Daniel's decision to stand firm by giving him favor and blessing him and his friends with wisdom, health, and strength beyond anyone else in the king's court. Now, let's fast forward to today. We may not live in ancient Babylon, but we're surrounded by pressures to conform. Maybe it's at school, where standing up for your beliefs could make you a target for ridicule. Or perhaps it's at work, where you're tempted to cut corners, tell a white lie, or go along with unethical practices because that's just how things are done. And let's not forget social media, where the pressure to fit in can be overwhelming. It's easy to feel like standing up for your faith or values makes you stand out in all the wrong ways. But here's the secret: when you stand firm, God sees it. He honors it. Just like He gave Daniel favor with the Babylonian officials, He will give you the strength and grace you need to navigate these situations. It might not always be easy, and it might not always be immediate, but God is always faithful. Faithfulness in the little things. One of the most powerful parts of this lesson is that Daniel's stand wasn't about a big, dramatic event. It was about a simple decision to be faithful in something as small as food. Sometimes, we think faithfulness only matters in the big moments, but the truth is, it's the little decisions, those seemingly insignificant choices, that shape our character and demonstrate our commitment to God. Think about it: would Daniel have been ready to face the lion's den later in his life if he hadn't first stood firm in this smaller test of faith? Probably not. The courage to face big challenges often grows out of our obedience in the small ones. For example, maybe for you, it's choosing honesty in a situation where lying would be easier. Or maybe it's prioritizing time with God even when your schedule feels packed. Whatever it is, know that your faithfulness in the small things is preparing you for something bigger. God's blessing on faithfulness. Here's what's so encouraging about Daniel's story: God blessed his faithfulness. Not only did Daniel and his friends remain healthy on their simple diet, but they were found to be 10 times wiser than all the other young men in the king's court. Daniel's obedience opened the door for him to influence the most powerful kingdom of his time. The same is true for us. When we choose to honor God, even when it's hard, we position ourselves to receive His blessings. This doesn't mean life will always be easy or that we'll never face challenges. But it does mean that God's favor and presence will be with us. As Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. When we trust God and stand firm in faith, He takes care of the rest. So how can we apply this to our daily lives? Here are 3 practical tips for standing firm in your faith. 1. Know your values. Spend time in God's Word to understand what He says about how we should live. When you're clear on your values, it's easier to stand firm when they're challenged. 2. Pray for strength. Standing firm isn't always easy, but prayer is your greatest weapon. Ask God for the strength and courage to stay faithful in every situation. 3. Find support. Surround yourself with people who share your faith and values. Just like Daniel had his 3 friends, having a strong support system can make all the difference. Remember, you're not standing alone, God is with you every step of the way. Standing firm in your faith might not always be easy, but it's always worth it. God sees your heart, your faithfulness, and your willingness to honor Him even when it's hard. And just like He did for Daniel, He will bless you and give you the strength to thrive, no matter the circumstances. So the next time you feel pressured to compromise or go along with the crowd, remember Daniel's story. Remember that God is with you and that your faithfulness matters, even in the little things. As Daniel 1 verse 9 says, now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. God sees your faithfulness, and He is faithful to you in return. You've got this. Keep standing firm, and watch what God does in your life. Secret number 2, trust God when life feels dangerous or uncertain. When we think of Daniel, the first story that probably comes to mind is the lion's den, and for good reason. It's one of the most powerful demonstrations of faith and trust in God found in the Bible. Imagine being thrown into a pit of hungry lions, knowing the situation looks completely hopeless. What would you do? Would you panic? Would you give up? Or would you trust God? Daniel's response is incredible. He trusted God completely, even in the face of what seemed like certain death. And what happened? God showed up in an undeniable way, shutting the mouths of the lions and delivering Daniel from harm. Now, our challenges may not involve literal lions, but we all face our own lions in life, things that feel scary, uncertain, or overwhelming. It might be financial struggles, health problems, relational pain, or a difficult decision looming over you. Whatever it is, the lesson is the same: when we trust God, He has the power to deliver us in ways we can't even imagine. Let's dig deeper into Daniel's story and see how it applies to our lives today. The story of the lion's den. Let's recap the story from Daniel 6. By this point, Daniel was no longer a young man. He had spent years serving in the Babylonian and Persian empires, earning respect and trust as a man of integrity and wisdom. But his faithfulness to God didn't go unnoticed by his enemies. The other administrators and officials, jealous of Daniel's success, plotted against him. They convinced King Darius to issue a decree that anyone who prayed to any god or human other than the king himself would be thrown into the lion's den. They knew Daniel wouldn't compromise his faith, and they were right. What did Daniel do? Did he stop praying to avoid trouble? Did he try to hide his faith? Nope. Daniel continued to pray to God 3 times a day, just as he always had, with the windows open for all to see. His faithfulness to God was unshaken, even when the stakes were life and death. As a result, Daniel was arrested and thrown into the lion's den. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? The pit. The roaring lions. The cold reality of danger surrounding him. But Daniel didn't waver. He trusted God completely, and God delivered him. That night, God sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions, and Daniel emerged unharmed the next morning, to the amazement of the king and everyone else. What are the lions in your life? Now let's bring this story into our lives today. Most of us won't face actual lions, but we will face situations that feel just as dangerous or uncertain. What are the lions in your life? Maybe it's a financial crisis that keeps you awake at night, wondering how you'll make ends meet. Maybe it's a health scare, waiting for test results or facing a diagnosis that feels overwhelming. Maybe it's a broken relationship, a conflict at work, or an uncertain future that's leaving you feeling anxious and afraid. In moments like these, it's easy to feel like we're in the lion's den, completely surrounded, with no way out. But just like God was with Daniel, He is with you in your lion's den too. Trusting God in the unknown. The key to Daniel's story isn't just that God saved him, it's that Daniel trusted God before he saw the outcome. He didn't know how God would work, but he trusted that God would work. This is where faith comes in. Trusting God doesn't mean we won't feel fear or uncertainty. It means choosing to lean into God's promises even when we don't see the solution yet. It means saying, God, I don't know how this will turn out, but I trust that you are in control. Here's a powerful promise to hold on to when life feels uncertain: the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Psalm 34 verse 7. This verse reminds us that we are never alone. Just as God sent an angel to protect Daniel, He surrounds us with His presence and delivers us from danger, even when we can't see it. God's power to deliver. One of the most amazing things about trusting God is seeing how He delivers us in ways we could never imagine. Sometimes, God shuts the mouths of the lions, like He did for Daniel, completely removing the danger. Other times, He walks with us through the trial, giving us the strength to endure and grow in faith. Maybe you've experienced this in your own life. Perhaps you've seen God provide just what you needed when you thought you'd run out of options. Maybe you felt His peace in the middle of a storm or seen Him restore something you thought was lost forever. God's power to deliver isn't limited to the past. It's just as real today as it was in Daniel's time. So, how do we trust God when we're in the lion's den? Here are 3 practical steps. 1. Pray honestly. Bring your fears, doubts, and struggles to God in prayer. Just like Daniel prayed consistently, make prayer your go-to response in times of trouble. God hears you. 2. Cling to God's promises. Fill your heart with verses that remind you of God's faithfulness. Write them down, memorize them, and speak them over your situation. For example, Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you." 3. Focus on God's character. When life feels uncertain, remember who God is: loving, faithful, and all-powerful. The same God who delivered Daniel is the God who holds you in his hands today. God is always working. I want to encourage you with this truth: God is always working, even in the lion's den of life. You might not see it right away, and the situation might not change instantly, but God is moving behind the scenes. Just as he shut the mouths of the lions for Daniel, he is able to protect, provide, and deliver you in ways beyond anything you can imagine. So the next time you face a lion, whether it's fear, uncertainty, or danger, remember Daniel's story. Trust in God, lean into his promises, and know that you are never alone. Daniel's story reminds us that God's power is greater than any danger or challenge we face. Trusting him doesn't mean we won't face trials, but it does mean we'll never face them alone. Keep trusting, keep praying, and watch how God shows up in your life. Secret number 3, stay consistent in prayer, no matter what. One of the most remarkable things about Daniel's life is his unwavering commitment to prayer. In fact, his prayer life was so consistent and visible that it became the very thing his enemies used to trap him. In Daniel 6 verse 10, we learn that Daniel prayed 3 times a day, every day, with his windows open, even when a law was passed making it illegal. Think about that for a second. Daniel didn't just pray occasionally or when he felt like it. He had a rhythm, a discipline, and a deep understanding of how vital prayer is to staying connected to God. And here's the lesson for us: prayer isn't just something we do when life gets tough, it's our lifeline, our anchor, and our connection to the Creator of the universe. Imagine the peace, clarity, and strength we could experience if we made prayer a consistent part of our daily routine, just like Daniel did. Let's dive into this powerful secret and see how we can build a prayer life that transforms us. Daniel's prayer life, a model of faithfulness. Daniel's prayer life wasn't just a casual habit, it was a defining part of his identity. In Daniel 6, we read that King Darius issued a decree that no one could pray to any god or man except the king for 30 days. The penalty for disobedience: being thrown into the lion's den. For most people, this would have been a moment to panic or compromise. But not Daniel. The Bible tells us in Daniel 6 verse 10, "Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before." Did you catch that? Just as he had done before. Daniel didn't change his routine, his posture, or his commitment. He prayed with the same consistency and faithfulness he had practiced for years. His prayer life wasn't dependent on circumstances, it was a non-negotiable part of his relationship with God. Even though Daniel knew the consequences, he trusted God enough to remain faithful. And as we know, God honored Daniel's faithfulness, delivering him from the lion's den and turning his trial into a testimony that glorified God before an entire kingdom. So, why does consistency in prayer matter so much? Let's break it down. Prayer keeps us connected to God. Prayer isn't just a ritual, it's a relationship. When we pray consistently, we stay in close communion with God, aligning our hearts with His will and experiencing His presence in our daily lives. It's like staying in constant contact with a trusted friend. You grow closer, more attuned to each other, and more confident in the relationship. Prayer builds faith and resilience. Life is full of ups and downs, and consistency in prayer strengthens our ability to handle both. When we make prayer a daily habit, it becomes our first response, not our last resort. It's the foundation that keeps us grounded in God's promises, no matter what life throws our way. Prayer opens the door to God's power. James 5 verse 16 says, "The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective." When we pray consistently, we invite God's power into our lives, our decisions, and our challenges. It's in those quiet moments with Him that we experience His guidance, peace, and provision. What happens when we don't pray consistently? Let's be honest, consistency in prayer isn't always easy. Life gets busy, distractions creep in, and sometimes we just don't feel like praying. But when we neglect prayer, we start to feel the effects, we lose clarity. Without regular time in God's presence, it's easy to feel lost or uncertain about the direction we should take. We feel spiritually disconnected. Prayer keeps us rooted in God's love and truth. Without it, we can feel distant from Him. We miss out on God's peace. Philippians 4 verses 6 to 7 tells us that prayer brings peace that surpasses all understanding. When we stop praying, we miss out on that deep, sustaining peace. So how can we build a prayer life that's consistent and meaningful? Here are some practical tips to get started. Set a schedule. Just like Daniel prayed 3 times a day, set specific times to pray each day. Whether it's first thing in the morning, during lunch, or before bed, having a routine helps make prayer a natural part of your day. Create a prayer space. Find a quiet, comfortable place where you can focus on God without distractions. It could be a corner of your room, a park bench, or even your car. Start small. If praying consistently feels overwhelming, start with just 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night. Over time, as your relationship with God grows, you'll naturally want to spend more time with Him. Use tools to stay focused. Keep a prayer journal to write down your prayers and reflect on how God answers them. You can also use Scripture as a guide, praying through verses that speak to your heart. Be honest with God. Prayer doesn't have to be perfect. Talk to God honestly about your struggles, joys, and everything in between. He cares about every detail of your life. Here's a challenge for you: commit to praying consistently this week. Start small, maybe 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night. As you build this habit, watch how God begins to move in your life. You might notice more peace in your heart, clarity in your decisions, or even unexpected blessings. The beauty of prayer is that it's not about what we say or do. It's about connecting with a God who loves us unconditionally and wants to guide us through every moment of our lives. Daniel's story reminds us that God honors faithful, consistent prayer. When we make prayer a priority, we invite His presence into every area of our lives. And here's the thing: you don't have to be perfect at prayer. God isn't looking for eloquence or long, impressive words. He's looking for a heart that's open and willing to connect with Him. As you commit to staying consistent in prayer, remember this promise from Jeremiah 29 verse 12, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you." God is always listening, always near, and always ready to meet you in prayer. So, let's take a page from Daniel's book and make prayer a consistent, unshakable part of our lives. Whether life is calm or chaotic, let's choose to stay connected to the God who loves us and is always working for our good. Secret number 4, you can influence the world without compromising your faith. This is one of the most powerful lessons we can learn from Daniel's life. Daniel wasn't just a believer quietly practicing his faith in the background. He was a leader, a visionary, and an advisor to kings. He held an incredibly influential position in one of the most powerful empires of his time, and he did it without ever compromising his faith or values. In today's world, you might feel like you're stuck choosing between being faithful to God and succeeding in your career, school, or community. But here's the good news: Daniel's life proves that you don't have to choose. You can live out your faith boldly while making a significant impact on the world around you. Let's dive deeper into this powerful secret and explore how you can influence without compromise. Daniel's journey, a life of influence and integrity. Daniel's journey to influence didn't start with ease or privilege. He was taken as a young man from his home in Jerusalem, carried into exile in Babylon, and forced to serve in a foreign culture that completely opposed his faith. Yet, even in these challenging circumstances, Daniel rose to prominence. Daniel's ability to influence began with his unwavering commitment to God. He never let the pressures of Babylonian culture or the expectations of the royal court sway his beliefs. Instead, he consistently honored God in every situation. One of the earliest examples of this is in Daniel 1, where he refused to eat the royal food and wine that had been offered to idols. Daniel resolved to stick to a diet of vegetables and water, trusting that God would sustain him. And God did. Daniel and his friends thrived, and their integrity set them apart from everyone else. As Daniel's life progressed, he was placed in positions of increasing influence. He interpreted King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams when no one else could, and his wisdom and insight earned him favor. By the time of King Darius, Daniel was one of the highest-ranking officials in the kingdom. Yet, through it all, Daniel remained faithful to God. This is a lesson for us. Daniel's influence wasn't a result of him blending in or compromising his faith. It was a result of his integrity, his faithfulness to God, and the way he allowed God to work through him. What it means to influence without compromise. So, what does it actually mean to influence without compromise? It means holding on to your faith and values even when the world around you pressures you to conform. In today's world, there's constant pressure to go along to get along. You might feel like you have to cut corners at work to get ahead, stay silent about your beliefs to fit in with your peers, or compromise your values to keep the peace. But Daniel's story shows us that it's possible to stand firm in your faith while still making a positive impact. Here's the truth: influence isn't about conforming. Real influence comes from integrity, consistency, and the courage to stand for what's right. When you live with integrity, people notice. They might not always agree with you, but they'll respect you. And over time, God will open doors for you to make a difference in ways you never expected. Modern challenges: staying faithful in a complicated world. Let's be honest, staying faithful to God in today's world can feel complicated. Maybe you work in an environment where honesty isn't prioritized, and you're tempted to take shortcuts to meet expectations. Maybe you're in a group of friends where your beliefs make you stand out, and it's easier to stay quiet than to speak up. In moments like these, it's tempting to think that compromise is the only way forward. But here's the reality: compromising your faith may seem like an easier path in the short term, but it ultimately weakens your influence. True influence comes from living a life that reflects God's character, even when it's difficult. Think about Daniel. When the decree went out banning prayer, he could have prayed in secret or skipped his prayers altogether. But instead, he continued praying publicly, just as he always had. His faithfulness not only brought him closer to God, but it also showed everyone around him, including King Darius, what it meant to trust God fully. The secret to godly influence: letting your faith shine. So, how do we let our faith shine without compromising? Here are 3 key principles we can learn from Daniel. Be consistent in your faith. People notice when your actions align with your beliefs. Daniel's consistency, whether in his prayer life, his dietary choices, or his work ethic, earned him respect and set him apart. Whatever situation you're in, let your faith guide your decisions consistently. Stay humble and respectful. Daniel never imposed his beliefs on others or acted arrogantly. Instead, he served with humility and respect, even when he disagreed with those in power. When you approach others with humility and grace, you reflect God's character and build trust. Trust God with the results. Daniel didn't try to manipulate situations to gain influence. He trusted God to open the right doors and protect him when he faced opposition. The same is true for us. When we trust God and stay faithful, He'll work behind the scenes in ways we can't imagine. Here are some practical ways to live out this secret in your own life. Integrate faith into your work. Whatever your job is, approach it with integrity and excellence. Colossians 3 verse 23 reminds us, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." Speak truth with love. When conversations about faith or values come up, don't shy away. Share your perspective with kindness and respect, letting God's love shine through your words. Be a role model. Your actions speak louder than words. By living with integrity and showing kindness, you can inspire others to see what it means to follow God. Pray for opportunities. Ask God to give you opportunities to influence others for His glory. Whether it's a conversation with a coworker, a chance to serve someone in need, or a moment to share your testimony, trust God to open the right doors. God honors faithful influence. Here's the most encouraging part: when you choose to influence without compromise, God honors it. He'll give you wisdom, strength, and opportunities to make an impact that reflects His glory. Just like Daniel, your faithfulness can inspire others and point them toward God. It might not always be easy, but it's always worth it. As Matthew 5 verse 16 reminds us, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Your faith can change the world. Daniel's life proves that you don't have to compromise your faith to make a difference. In fact, it's your faith and integrity that give you the ability to influence others in a powerful way. So, whatever situation you're in, remember this: God has placed you there for a reason. Stay faithful, let your light shine, and watch how He uses you to impact the world around you. Secret number 5, trusting when you can't see the bigger picture. Have you ever felt like life just isn't making sense? Like the pieces of your story don't seem to fit together? It's in those moments that we can find comfort and hope in one powerful truth: God is always working, even when we can't see it. Daniel's life gives us an incredible example of what it means to trust God's bigger plan. He was given visions and prophecies that spanned centuries, things far beyond his own understanding or lifetime. Yet, Daniel trusted that God's plans were good, and he faithfully carried out his role in the unfolding of God's story. In the same way, we don't always see the big picture in our own lives. Maybe you're wondering why you're in a season of waiting or why things aren't going the way you hoped. But here's the truth: God's plans are always good, and His timing is perfect. Let's explore this powerful secret and see how we can trust in God's bigger plan for our lives. Daniel's role in God's bigger plan. Daniel's life was deeply connected to God's bigger plan for humanity. Through dreams and visions, God revealed to Daniel events that would shape history for generations to come. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream about a giant statue made of different materials. No one could interpret it, except Daniel, who sought wisdom from God. Daniel explained that the statue represented a series of kingdoms that would rise and fall, leading up to God's eternal kingdom, which would never be destroyed. Later, in Daniel 7 and 9, Daniel received even more visions, including the prophecy of the Messiah and the end of days. These revelations were massive in scope, spanning centuries and influencing people far beyond Daniel's lifetime. Here's the key: Daniel couldn't possibly understand how all the pieces fit together. He was living in exile, under the rule of foreign kings, and facing challenges in his immediate life. Yet, he trusted God's plan, knowing that God was weaving a story far greater than he could imagine. What can we learn from this? When life feels uncertain or overwhelming, we can trust that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating a bigger plan that's for our ultimate good and His glory. Why trusting God's plan can be difficult? Let's be honest, trusting God's plan isn't always easy. Maybe you're in a season of waiting, wondering why your prayers haven't been answered. Maybe you're facing a setback that feels unfair or unexpected. Or maybe you're struggling to understand why certain things have happened in your life. In these moments, it's easy to feel discouraged. We want to see results. We want to understand the why. But here's the thing: our perspective is limited, while God's perspective is infinite. Isaiah 55 verses 8 to 9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts." When we don't understand what God is doing, we have to remember that He sees the whole picture. He knows how every piece of our story fits into His greater plan. And while it might not make sense to us right now, we can trust that His plans are always for our good. The promise of Romans 8 verse 28. One of the most comforting promises in Scripture is found in Romans 8 verse 28, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." This verse doesn't mean that everything in life will be easy or perfect. It doesn't mean we won't face challenges, pain, or disappointment. But it does mean that God is working in all things, even the hard things, for our good. Think about a tapestry. From the back, it looks messy, with tangled threads and no clear pattern. But when you flip it over, you see a beautiful masterpiece. That's what our lives are like from God's perspective. The struggles, setbacks, and unanswered questions are all part of a greater design that God is weaving together for His glory and our good. Trusting in seasons of waiting. One of the hardest parts of trusting God's plan is waiting. Waiting for a breakthrough. Waiting for answers. Waiting for clarity. Daniel knew what it was like to wait. He spent years in exile, serving in a foreign land, and waiting for the fulfillment of God's promises. Yet, he remained faithful. He prayed daily, sought God's wisdom, and trusted that God's timing was perfect. If you're in a season of waiting, I want to encourage you, God hasn't forgotten you. He's not silent. He's preparing something far greater than you can imagine. As Psalm 27 verse 14 says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." Waiting is never wasted when we trust God. It's in the waiting that He shapes our character, deepens our faith, and prepares us for what's ahead. How to trust God's bigger plan. So, how can we trust God's bigger plan when life feels uncertain? Here are 3 practical steps. 1. Seek God in prayer and His Word. When we spend time in prayer and study Scripture, we're reminded of God's faithfulness throughout history. Seeing how He fulfilled His promises to Daniel, Joseph, and others strengthens our trust in His plan for our lives. 2. Surrender control. Trusting God means letting go of our need to control every outcome. It's about saying, "God, I don't understand this, but I trust you." Surrendering doesn't mean giving up, it means placing your life in the hands of a loving, sovereign God. 3. Reflect on God's faithfulness. Take time to reflect on the ways God has been faithful in your past. Remembering how He's worked in your life before can give you confidence that He's working now, even if you don't see it yet. Your story is part of God's masterpiece. Here's the beautiful truth, your story is part of God's masterpiece. Every moment, good and bad, is being woven into His greater plan. Maybe you're facing a challenge right now and wondering how it could possibly fit into God's design. But just like Daniel trusted God's plan for the future, you can trust that God is working in your life, even in the details you don't understand. Ephesians 3 verse 20 reminds us that God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. Trust that His plans for you are greater than anything you could dream for yourself. So, when life feels uncertain, when the pieces don't seem to fit, and when you're in a season of waiting, remember this: God's plans are always good, and His timing is always perfect. Like Daniel, you can trust that your story is part of a much bigger masterpiece. So there you have it, 5 powerful secrets from Daniel's life that we can apply to our own circumstances today. Let's take a moment to recap these timeless lessons. 1. Stand firm in your faith. Daniel's unwavering commitment to God reminds us that staying true to our beliefs, even when it's hard, can open doors for God's blessings in our lives. Whether you're facing peer pressure, workplace challenges, or tough decisions, Daniel's example shows us the power of faith and integrity. 2. Trust God in the face of danger. Whether it was the lion's den or standing up to powerful kings, Daniel trusted that God was in control, even in the most dangerous situations. For us, the lions might look different: financial struggles, health scares, or difficult relationships, but the lesson remains: when we trust God, He works in ways we can't imagine. 3. Stay consistent in prayer. One of the most inspiring things about Daniel was his dedication to prayer. He prayed 3 times a day, no matter the circumstances, even when it became illegal. His consistency in seeking God not only gave him strength but also opened the door for miracles. Imagine what God could do in your life if you committed to regular, heartfelt prayer. 4. Influence the world without compromise. Daniel was a leader and an advisor to kings, but he never compromised his faith to fit in. He showed us that it's possible to succeed in the world while staying true to God. Whether you're at work, school, or in your community, let your integrity and faith shine. God will use your example to impact others in ways you never expected. 5. Trust God's bigger plan. Perhaps the most important secret of all, trust that God is always working, even when you don't see it. Daniel was given visions of future events that spanned centuries, things far beyond his understanding. Yet, he trusted that God's plan was good. The same is true for us. When life feels uncertain or confusing, we can rest in the promise of Romans 8 verse 28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Daniel's life wasn't easy. He faced challenges, danger, and uncertainty, yet his faith, courage, and trust in God led to incredible things. His story is a reminder that the same God who was with Daniel in the lion's den, in exile, and in his moments of victory is with you today. If this message encourages you, please hit that like button, subscribe to Spiritual Journals and share it with someone who might need these reminders. Let's keep growing together in faith and courage. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.